Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for a live panel discussion here on Food Industry Executive. Super excited to have you all here today. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping things. If you have any questions at all throughout the presentation, go ahead and drop those into the questions panel in Zoom, and we will address them at the end of the broadcast. We will also be sending out the recording and the slides after the webinar today. So if you miss anything, no biggie, we have you covered. So today we're going to hear from QAD Red Zone and their customers, Bizzy Coffee, Kind, and Noosa Yoghurt, on how they've been able to transform their organizations by empowering their frontline employees to work with purpose and win the day every day. We'll discuss how to make a digital transformation accessible for all, the benefits of real-time visibility, and easy steps to take to engage and empower your frontline employees. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our moderator, John.
Okay, thank you very much. You really appreciate your folks' time, and excited to spend the next hour or so talking about some of these fantastic stories, and then also answer some of your specific questions. So I promise to not spend too much of the time talking myself, but just a quick background, I think, on me, because I do want to tell a little bit of a story before we get into Nicole, Derek, and Shane's. I want to just spend a little bit of time on sort of conceptually what Red Zone is before they tell their story. So Jonathan Lane, Solutions Director with Red Zone. I've been with the company for, I'd say, around 5.5 years. And my background and sort of what drew me to Red Zone was I was running a plant myself. So I was a plant manager. I had been, sort of dabbling in the Toyota production system. We were tracking a lot of things on whiteboards and the Excel spreadsheets and moving paper all around. And essentially, I hadn't really seen anything done digitally. And at that point in time, I encountered Red Zone in an interview process and was just sort of blown away with what they were doing with around, empowering the shop floor worker, which is something that I was really trying to do on our team. And then also, through the mobile digital platform, making it easy for everyone to understand, where specifically they were at any moment in time, and have, at Red Zone, we've talked a lot about inverting the triangle is something we're really proud of. So how did my team, for example, in my plan as a leadership group, support the shop floor workers? Because ultimately, we believe that they're probably the most important people within that process. So I'll go around the group here real quick for an intro, and then what I'll do is I'm going to talk a little bit about the technology, and then we'll go into some of their success stories that they had along their journey. So Nicole, I'll quickly pass it over to you.
All right, thanks, John. My name is Nicole Oster. I'm the Director of Quality at Kind Snacks out of the High Point, North Carolina facility. We implemented Red Zone back in 2021 with the productivity module, and we quickly went into the compliance module, where we had a lot of wins out of that program. And then we also went into the learning module and the reliability module as well. Happy to be here and hope we can answer any questions about Red Zone.
And Derek, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, Derek Hoffman, VP of Operations, Bizzy Coffee, or Bizzy Cold Brew, is our new rebrand. We are located just outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota. I've been a Red Zone user since 2013 with the prior company. We at Bizzy Coffee here, we did the productivity module first, compliance second. Saw huge wins on the productive piece of it. Really focusing a lot of our efforts on downtime elimination, and then engaging our staff as a young manufacturer. Really cool to be able to teach and grow our staff's knowledge of production through Red Zone.
Okay, and finally, Shane, please.
Yeah, my name is Shane Anderson. I'm the CI manager of Noosa. We implemented Noosa implemented Red Zone here at Noosa in 2017, July of 2017 to be exact. We first came out of the gate with productivity. Soon after that, I think 4 months later, we did a compliance piece. And then there's a big gap of time. And then we finally came on board with reliability in very beginning of 2022. Been here at Noosa for 7.5 years, and I've used Red Zone in many different capacities. So excited to be here today.
Okay, Shane, thank you very, very much, sir. Well, real quickly, again, because I know you folks are not here to listen to me, but I want to just chat for a minute about, what is this? How are plants sort of setting up in the initial stages? Like, how are we utilizing the software to see some of the improvements that you're going to hear, Nicole, Derek, and Shane talk about? So out of the gate within our facilities that we're working in, let's create that visual factory so that operators, management, anyone is able to basically work off of the same sheet of music. And I gave you a little bit of the background on my history is, very much we felt disjointed, I guess, on a day-to-day basis. A lot of the time was spent maybe walking around to try to find where we were at throughout the course of any given shift. And ultimately, it was, we were probably spending a lot of time doing non-value added activities rather than focus our time and energy on, the problems that are on the shop floor. So just at a super high level, we call this the Red Zone formula. So when I came in, even though I had a lean background, it doesn't mean that John's going to implement Red Zone a certain way at Bizzy and it's going to be done differently at Kind and Noosa. It's, how do we know the score on the shop floor? So target specific to, lines and SKUs, not a generic thing like we had maybe created in our plant. We're using OEE or throughput, maybe if you speak in cases or eaches, to quickly have operators understand, hey, am I winning or losing? And ultimately that generates some of this competition that, has everyone we think wants, they ultimately want to do a good job on the shop floor. So if I'm knowing that I'm, a little bit behind my target, how can we create that competition? And then of course, communication, we'll talk about that a lot today, but communication is such a big thing that I think is missing in many of the different facilities. So how can I ask for help? How can I recognize someone when they're doing well? And those sorts of things. When we get into, the win the day mentality, it's a lot of the formulas that some of you maybe are familiar with the Toyota production system. So what are the right routines? We know that if we huddle a couple times the shift, and we're not talking, up in a boardroom, but 2 to 5 minutes line side, create an issue or an action for the absolute top area that's causing us downtime that day, and then ask for help. So escalate those to a daily or weekly review when required. That's what starts to drive that continuous improvement mentality. We have 2 Kaizen activities generally baked into this 90-day deployment. You'll hear us, within Red Zone, 90-day deployment. We got 4 specific weeks, 2 Kaizen activities that are data-driven. So we're gathering data off the lines, off the machines, implementing simple problem-solving tools, nothing crazy, some root cause, 5 whys solutions within that week-long Kaizen activity. And then ultimately, measuring, hey, where did we get to? Not creating a bunch of actions. What did we actually do and celebrate the success? And what we've found then is it allows, the entire plant from leadership group to have aligned goals all the way down to, the person that is running the actual equipment, focus on those vital few issues and simplify people's jobs and ultimately win together. So this is sort of this is the screen I joke with people, had me essentially make a career path change, because Red Zone didn't sell into the industry. So we're talking a lot about food and beverage. I made exhaust manifolds. So when I'd seen this, it's like, well, no, we wouldn't be able to work in your plant. So I kind of talked to my wife and said, hey, would you mind a career path change? And ultimately, like, this is what I was trying to build on pen and paper. So how am I doing at an overall plant level? If we break it down into specific areas, so maybe I've got 2 areas of production and 3 in packing, red, green, making things easy to identify where I want to focus my time and energy. So I'm on production line 1. I got started at exactly 12 o'clock. I've made 13,000 eaches. My line is currently not running. My power hour, so first hour of the shift, I'm going to guess there's some heads nodding, but any industry I've been in, it's amazing the correlation between, if you have a good first hour, you almost always have a good rest of the shift. And then how am I performing across that line? So 75% versus a target, 54% versus a target of 74. When I open that line up, here's commonly a screen that you'd see at an operator workstation. So my target OE is 74%. I'm actually at 62. And then as a manager, for me, when I used to go into problem solving mode, the 62 number is fantastic, but I wanted to kind of focus more on those three metrics. So performance, how fast am I running? I'm not throwing anything out, but my machine has physically been stopped for, let's call it 30% of the day. Swipe another to the left, and well, why is that? And this is where we're engaging the operator. Hey, my labeler's been down 10 times, skipping labels. It's cost me 43 minutes of downtime and $2,600 worth of product. When the line goes down, and this is where we believe the operators add a ton of value. They're not just a robot there. All they can do is hit a button. They have eyes, ears, nose. They can assess what's going on. So they've got a problem. Boom, I open that problem up. And big thing in a lot of plants I'm in, I was just in one earlier this morning, is any downtime code, that's less than 10 minutes, they just don't capture it. But my sensors say, hey, you know what, between 3:35, it's not subjective. It's when the line saw product, when it didn't. I was down for exactly 3 minutes. And hey, you know what, I was skipping labels. And let's continue to build that Pareto as we're, so all of us to see the same thing. When I hit on the competition and communication, you can imagine, large screen TVs. I'm a big sports fan. I was at the Cincinnati Reds game this weekend, and we're following the scoreboard, just like in a red zone plant. Hey, I'm on packing line 1. I have 16 points today. Packing line 2 is 10 and packing line 1 is 4. What's going on? How can I get these guys help? And last few before I pass it over to those folks is we've talked about communication and engaging the operators. So push notification, very similar to what you would see on your your personal iPhone or whatever. I open that up. Hey, I'm not talking about necessarily fantasy football or what's going on the weekend or what groceries my wife wants me to get. I'm talking about, hey, the dates aren't printing properly on line 1. Alex Jackson's able to quickly say, oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Raul, a lot of the plants we're in, there's more languages than just English. So we've got Google Translate built straight into the app. And I think that Nicole probably has some interesting stories about the different languages that are spoken there. I see her laughing, so I'm guessing that's the case. But so I can just quickly translate to my native tongue, or I can have the app set up in all Spanish if that's what, or all French or all Japanese, whatever I want to have that app set up in. And then last thing before I sort of talk a little bit more about the overall industry pain points and these folks' journeys is, initially, I've spent most of my time that I've sort of shown the screenshots on the productivity module. So Nicole's team was quality plant of the year within the Red Zone community last year. This is now we've flipped over to more, how am I doing exactly in real time instead of productivity from a quality perspective. So I'm packing line 1, here's my entire run. Every green check is a pass. What time was it completed? What was it? A red check is a fail. And a black check is a missed. So before I got into this role, I was a red zone coach, and a lot of the plants I was in, we knew things were going to fail. But when there was misses, we really wanted to draw attention to that and make sure that people knew, like, hey, why was I missing that check? Is that acceptable? Is that not acceptable? Some pretty big opportunities there. So what we've seen, within the industry overall is a lot of these common pain points. And we have a few different questions that I want to ask the panelists here in a minute, but definitely a lot of the plant I was in this morning, that was the first thing they talked about. It's like, we don't have any real-time visibility. So we're consistently either doing things at the end of the day, or my plant, we were bad, we would do it at the end of the week. So on a Friday, we would sort of assess where we were at throughout the course of the weekend. A lot of that opportunity is now gone. The communication gaps, whether it's, we've got radios that we're working off of, or it's texting or things back and forth. The shop floor feels disconnected overall from, what's going on in the business. And double data entry. That's definitely something that, I'm sure there's lots of folks that have felt that, where it just feels like I'm I'm continually entering things that aren't necessarily actionable. And of course, the reactive culture. And I think with that reactive culture comes a lack of accountability. So it's just, I think, how was today? That was a question we talked about this morning. They say, well, how did the plant run today? And the answers are, oh, okay, or not great, or terrible, or I'm not really sure. All of a sudden, it's exactly what the score is at that moment in time. So without me doing a whole lot more talking, I think that Hillary's going to set up an audience poll. So I think I'll have her sort of share what we need from you folks to be able to do that. But just going through some of these questions, and then we have some questions specifically before we get to those.
All right, thank you so much. I have opened up a poll that you should be seeing on your screen now. Just fill in your answer for what is the biggest issue impacting your operations. And select from the points that John just went over: lack of real-time visibility, communication gaps, double data entry, reactive culture, lacking accountability, or no root cause analysis. I'll give you guys a few moments to wrap up answering this poll.
Okay, thank you, Hillary. So let's go through a couple more, a little more detailed intros and some of the stories around, around our three panelists. So you'll notice here with Bizzy, they had productivity team of the year last year. And what we do within the Red Zone community. So we're over 1,200 plants now, and each year we have a variety of, awards, sort of like the Oscars or something. I'm not much of a movie buff, but I think the Oscars is movies, or the ESPYs maybe. But where we're going through the 1,200 plants, and we're going on a road trip, we're doing interviews, we're assessing their data, of course, of how they performed, and recognizing either at Chicago or Las Vegas at PAC Expo on the second night, we get as many of the community together as we can. And we go through, a celebration of, hey, and these folks actually won the productivity of the year last year. And I was hoping to sort of pass it over to Derek. And Derek, you could go ahead and kind of chat through that, like 52% productivity increase in 90 days. I mean, that's stuff in my plant where if we got 3 or 4 or 5% within a year, that was unbelievable. So if you'd be kind enough to sort of share your story, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah. So we implemented the productivity module at Red Zone in our plant. We immediately did the full screens, a lot of huddles, a lot of training. Bizzy Coffee is a relatively young manufacturing company, not a lot of experience. And it really the biggest piece was creating visibility to our issues. We did a lot of work on the availability side of our plant, make sure that we're running at all times. We had a lot of downtime. We were able to get some real easy victories by buying additional equipment to make our current equipment run better. Really bonded our teams together with that transparency. Everyone was a little worried about it at first, but once our frontline workers saw that management was willing to help support them and see those and put solves to those issues. Nobody likes waking up in the morning going to a plant where they've got 25 label issues throughout the day. Who wants to wake up and stub their toe all day? It doesn't feel good. So we're able to put some of those real easy solves. So all of a sudden those downtime events really started dwindling down and started running better. It's been something our team has grasped. And then the clarity of instead of, did you win half a day check-in? Did you win a quarter day check-in? Or at the end of the day, you can see the real-time data minute by minute. If you win every minute, guess what? You're going to win every hour. Win every hour, you're going to win every day. So it's really, really cool to see our people, even people with limited to no manufacturing experience, really grasp a few simple concepts and then run with it on their own. So all of a sudden, you can start worrying about how to grow your business and how to continue to double and keep finding capacity gains without having to do the CapEx or IRR calculations to say, should we be doing this?
Very nice. And you'd said that so you guys went up, you went with the visuals like pretty much right out of the gate, and the folks were able to take to those like and start to I guess do you feel that the competition communication that aspect helped them?
Oh, for sure, for sure. And even for us too, the downtime capture was immense to show that we're supporting them, that we're not going to say, oh, this is a problem. Don't use it as a grading tool. Say, okay, what's wrong with our setup? What did we miss? Let's get out there, work with them, be very collaborative, and put solves in place to make everyone's job easier. And then the competitive nature, the gamification is maybe what I would say. Hey, we had a good 15-minute burst. How do we now make that 15-minute burst into a half-hour burst? How do we make 1 hour good? How do we make 3 hours good, back to back to back? And then your team starts believing in itself that it can start doing these things. I think everyone's been on a team where someone says impossible without any reason or justification. For us, we were doing maybe 10 to 12 pallets of output a day. And just yesterday, we hit 86 pallets with the exact same equipment in a little over a shift for us. So not a good apples to apples comparison, but just to show the demonstration of if people can see it, they can believe it, and then they can start believing in themselves, and then they can start pushing themselves. As crazy as it sounds, they're all working harder, but they enjoy it a lot more.
No, that's fantastic. And I noticed so Hillary, we don't need to pull everything up yet, but I did notice that lack of real-time visibility is something that a lot of folks are talking about. So last thing before I don't want to hold it on you for too long, but what did you guys have prior, I guess, before you went onto the screens and you joined Red Zone? What were you doing for the visibility at that beforehand?
Yeah, beforehand it was a midday check-in and then panic and asking everyone to stay late. Basically abandon whatever home life you had, whatever plans you had after work. Please, please, please stay. And that was a big thing for us. The employee happiness and employee retention. Plan your work after work. We know what we can do to get the job done and get everything we need to get done within our 8-hour window of operations.
Okay, well, very nice. Well, I'll give you a break for a minute, and we'll move along to Nicole. So, I had I was lucky enough to actually meet Nicole's team, I think a couple of years ago, when they first, I think, were getting started, and then we were back on site maybe a year ago, and 8 or 10 weeks ago. So I've had a chance to spend a little bit of time with her and her group. So they actually won our quality team of the year. So similar to the productivity, we don't just look at what was my OEE uplift and when Derek talked about, we went from X number of cases to X number, this is now, and I don't want to, Nicole, I don't want to pigeonhole you into just talking about quality, but I do want to sort of recognize, what you guys have been able to do in that last 10 months with, I know that 1% of missed checks is, it's phenomenal once you've got everything implemented and all your checks off of that paper-based system. But would you be sort of kind enough to tell us a little bit of your guys' journey, in the productivity and then on the way to that quality team of the year?
Absolutely. Very similar to Derek with Bizzy Coffee, we also implemented visual management immediately with productivity, with the big screen TVs, out in strategic locations and production, using the big screen TVs for our daily vital signs meetings, which occurred several times a day. But what was really, really, really impactful is that you can take your iPad and display your information up on the big screen while you're doing your daily vital signs meeting. So you can have your static display.
Nicole, real quick, just so for the folks, a daily vital sign meeting in the kind world means?
It is essentially a huddle for management and operators to come together, similar to a shift start meeting.
Okay.
But we're discussing downtime, failed checks, quality issues, supply chain issues. So it's meant to be a quick 15-minute meeting, but very effective. And that is what Red Zone helped bring out, was you can have the static information displaying all day long, but when you go to your daily vital signs meeting, you can connect with a TV and start digging into line XYZ had this amount of downtime yesterday because of these reasons, and this was the corrective action for that downtime. So it became the ability to use that real-time data and demonstrate that you're making decisions and having an impact on the line. As you mentioned, we have over 20 languages spoken in our facility. So being able to have that communication is critical, and moving from paper-based systems to Red Zone, where you can choose different languages to input your data and receive your information, has been immensely impactful for our frontline leadership. They feel more empowered. They feel like they have an input, a way to communicate. And that, I think, was very critical to our compliance success, because along with having over 20 languages, when we implemented our compliance module, which was probably less than a month after we finished up productivity, at that time we had over 1,300 finished product SKUs. So as we were trying to put all of these checks into Red Zone, we were sitting in a room for well over a week trying to figure out what checks we could eliminate, what checks we could combine, which checks were critical, and all of that. And we ended up going from something like almost 7 different check sheets just for our metal detectors and HACCP down to 2. So it was huge effort to help streamline our process and make things much simpler for everyone on the floor. And if we can make our quality checks simpler, that obviously has a huge impact on productivity, has a huge impact on engagement as well.
Very, very nice. I was gonna give you a follow-up question just before I pass it along. So did you find I sort of showed the dashboard before, did the ability to quickly highlight, so when we talk now more specifically to quality for you guys, what was there, did you quickly realize that you've talked about, hey, I could react to downtime before, but you were able to react to maybe a quality issue starting to trend in the wrong direction, or something that you were able to identify and action on quickly?
Yeah, actually, we have some very specific examples. When we were paper-based, with having over 1,300 SKUs, obviously we have allergen considerations, and having that many SKUs, if you have a mishap and bring the wrong packaging to the line, obviously we could have a major issue if it's not caught. So one thing we were able to build into Red Zone is entering a UPC label, which matches a specific item number. And during the check, the operator scan the UPC, and if it's not the right packaging unit, that check is an immediate fail. So we know that we do not have an item number and a packaging match. So we have to investigate, do we have the wrong item number entered, or do we have the wrong packaging? So this was something that was actually caught like within the first couple of weeks of implementation. We ended up having 2 issues where it was flagged right away, and we didn't have to put any product on hold because the issue was caught and became non-existent.
Okay, well, very nice. Thank you very much for that. And I will, here we go, move along to not last but not least, of course, is Shane's team. So reliability team of the year. So for you folks that aren't, intimately familiar with Red Zone, we have 4 main modules: so productivity, compliance, reliability, and learning. The reliability and learning are on the newer end. So Shane's team at Noosa was, they won the reliability team of the year last year. And I was hoping, Shane, you could just kind of maybe tell a little bit about your overall journey, because you're fairly far down along that path, and then speak a little bit about the reliability specifically.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jonathan. That was where I was going to go initially, because when they put that poll up before everybody got on today, and we were looking over that, and we were talking about, what were the pinpoints for our factory, I looked at it and I said, all the above. Like, I mean, it truly was like everything on there was a problem for us. And so when we implemented red zone in 2017 with the productivity in our plant. Obviously, it's a big game changer. I keep seeing the lack of visibility. That was the immediate game changer, right? Because our factory is pretty automated, but then the way we were capturing data was kind of archaic. It was very much like what you had said, Jonathan. We'd walk around. I was in production at the time. On the leadership team there, we'd walk around with clipboards, and we worked 12-hour shifts, and you'd get to the end of your day and you go to an Excel spreadsheet and you're trying to plug in your calculated efficiency per hour, trying to remember what happened over the last 12 hours, and go into operators. Hey, what's your struggles today? And they're covered in yogurt. There's sometimes it's obvious and sometimes it's not what the problems have been. So obviously, when you got red zone, you turn that light switch on and you start seeing those numbers. Everybody's kind of gravitate towards it. It's like seeing MTV for the first time, right? And so like everybody's sort of like excited about it and gets on board. And so we saw immediate uplift like everybody talks about here. But then, for 2 years, we flatlined. In fact, we weren't progressing. And you hear about a lot of other factories that continue to, continue that journey upwards. That wasn't happening for us. We weren't necessarily slipping, but it just kind of was plateauing. And so I had stepped into this role in 2019 as a CI manager. And the immediate thing I saw just coming from production and having used the tool is that, there was no special sauce in what we needed to turn this thing around. It was getting back to the basics. And I know we'd kind of looked at that a little earlier on that screen of, looking at OEE. You can obsess about OEE, but if you're not doing the things every day, like I always reference John Wooden, if you guys don't know him, a great coach, right? In UCLA back in the day, he won gazillions of national championships, right? And he never obsessed actually about the scoreboard. He obsessed about the little things and doing those to perfection, because if you did those, the scoreboard's going to take care of itself. And so for us, it was really about turning it back, looking at that inverted pyramid again, because we were doing it wrong. We were starting to put the pyramid back the way we all normally see the pyramid. So for us, we had to start looking at it inverted again, that it was obsessing about the front line, which is one of our guiding principles here anyways. But it was really getting back to making huddles intentional and really driving huddles and making them of value. And not only for, the frontline worker, which this tool is their virtual voice in the factory, right? And so you as leadership showing up to those huddles, it holds you accountable. Like you need to show up, and you need to also hold yourself accountable that you're going to do the things that you say you're going to do. And so that they'll continue to put those actionable items and activities into the platform. And so when we started getting back and making huddles intentional, and really driving those changes again, that's when we started seeing every other department within, internally here start to ask questions about, well, how can we get red zone over here? And how can I get red zone in the warehouse? And how can I get red zone, in other areas of our factory that it didn't really exist? And so that was a good seeding point for us, because then, we finally could have those conversations where maintenance was always kind of hesitant to coming on, right? It was a production thing to do red zone, but we kind of got the pass over here in maintenance. We didn't have to necessarily be held to the same standards. Well, that changed because everybody started saying the questions like, well, hey, if I could just communicate with maintenance, and if I could just put in this work order with maintenance, if I could put in this sense with maintenance, I wouldn't have to put in all these actionable items and wait for this sort of back and forth. And so when we brought on reliability at the very beginning of 2022, it was late 2021 when we were launching, but really it went full factory in 2022. It was really about just making our team cohesive at that point. We'd all had the red zone, obviously. The biggest challenge I would say at that point was trying to get the PMs on there, because they were so used to using it at a different system in our factory and printing out these sheets that they would take down to the line. They'd lose the sheets, it'd get wet, fall on the floor. They just didn't like that piece. And so when the maintenance guys started carrying around their iPad minis and they were able to do their tasks and their PMs, all of a sudden it just flipped for them too. Instead of having to like kind of drive it to get them involved, it started becoming a thing where they started asking like, hey, can I get this PM? Or hey, can we tweak this? Or I'd really like this reminder. So they were actually putting more work back on themselves. It's kind of funny, right? But
Yeah.
it was all intentional to make their jobs easier, right? And so we ended up having an uplift of about 15% again. When we did reliability, what did that do for us in our factory? I mean, it afforded us the ability to actually carve out downtime, like where we could truly shut down the plant for a few days and do big projects that make the product better, that make us run better, where before we were always never had that afforded to us because we're always chasing, right? And so
Yep.
it was a great piece and a great tool. Obviously, it continues to be a big part of our journey here.
Well, thank you very much for that. And I think you hit on something that I won't spend a ton of time on it, but you know, it's the repetition of people. So you talked about the huddles and re-engaging. And before I sort of move on to our next questions, people often ask me, they say, well, why would Red Zone quote unquote fail? And we say, well, it's never, we don't have any plants that have failed, but the ones that have the lower uplifts are where they don't believe leadership has any part to play in that, if you will. You know, they think it's a shop floor tool, and it's holistic. You know, when you guys paid attention, your people are going to put in ideas. So, okay, I feel like I've stolen a bit too much time from some of the questions. So let's I'll start with you, Nicole, because you're no, you know what? I'll start with Derek. I've left him for too long. So this is one I actually I get asked sometimes, like, hey, what do you know? What do you wish you'd known when you started the process, or you probably were, there's folks on the line that are likely evaluating similarly to you. Um, your thought process when you were thinking about, hey, should I, shouldn't I? And what do you wish you'd known, and what would you have maybe done differently, whether start sooner or whatever that would be?
You know, probably in all reality, just the magnitude of the impact that it could have. When we first started doing it in 2013, way undersold. You know, relaunching it here at this current job had a lot more things, but probably just uh, I would say the growth of the different modules. That Red Zone isn't just a solution that doesn't want to continue to grow. They're constantly evolving and making the tools better. Is something that I didn't know, and our teams didn't know, but was a huge benefit. So don't just think of, if it's not 100% there today. They're always adding things. There's always continuous improvement within Red Zone as well.
And I think the neat thing is, Derek, it's folks like you that drive most, you know, all of the improvements. It's an idea that, hey, well, I mean, the compliance module in 2013 wasn't even a thing, you know, and
Yeah.
people said, hey, are you guys able to do this? So Nicole, anything you want to add into that before you kind of got in? And you can speak from a quality perspective if you'd like.
I think this is probably more a tactical piece, but I would have requested to have double to triple the number of iPads purchased from the very beginning, just
Get more people
because,
involved.
yes,
Yep.
the people, once everyone starts to see the ease of use and ease of implementation and how it makes their day-to-day job easier, everyone is asking, when can we do Red Zone? We actually had a department that kind of went out on their own and decided to start implementing some Red Zone checks. QA was definitely supportive of that, but it wasn't through kind of the typical implementation. So I would definitely count on more iPads than what you think you need.
Okay, very good. And Shane, I'll go over to you, and I'll put just a tiny twist on it, because I actually I was going to ask you folks, people sometimes wonder, like we say, you know, it's not an ERP system. So I deployed Dynamics 365 in my old plant, and I think we were like 16 months before we got rolling. Would you talk about kind of your initial deployment, and then also on that, what you wish you'd maybe known, or anything that you'd want to share, like, because we often talk about, you know, 6 to 10 weeks or whatever it is to get rolling.
Yeah, to be honest, like it's what Derek and Nicole have both said. I kind of feel like I wish we would have gotten more people from the beginning, the very beginning involved. So I think that would have sped us up a lot faster. We'd
Yeah.
be ahead of where we're at right now. Had departments not waited a few years to come on, like after 2017. And then to Nicole's point, I don't know, Red Zone will tell you maybe you need like 15, 20 iPads. I think we're up to about 65 now in the plant. I've done 32 weeks of launches between what we've done here and then down at our sister company, Michelangelo's, who has a whole nother gamut of issues that we don't see and challenges because they're kind of similar to Nicole's situation. They speak 8 languages down there. And so I've been through all of those. And so I think what I've done is I've helped to bridge the gap over there of all the mistakes we've made to help speed them along faster, right, in the process. So right off the bat, I told them that 15 iPads is not going to do it. You better go out and at least get 40 off the bat, get started, getting in people's hands earlier so that you're very intentional that this is a tool that's here to stay, and this is a tool we're going to use.
Okay, excellent. And I appreciate, I like hearing that because, you know, we often, you folks know that, you know, we don't have, you know, once you have a site license, we don't charge any extra if you add people, because we know Red Zone will be more successful the more people that get involved. So it's great to hear you guys all kind of say that. So I'm gonna move on, and so I'll stick with you for a minute, Shane, on this one. So what steps do you feel, you know, that we're able to make your folks feel empowered, and how's that impact you guys as a whole organizationally?
So what we virtually use Red Zone for almost every meeting now. So like if it's a meeting and a format meeting that you maybe was even done at round tables or Microsoft Teams, is that we use forums. We use forums a lot. And so for us, it was like using forums and breaking people down into smaller groups. You know, even our safety committees are on, everybody here is assigned to safety committees as part of our culture, to help find those solutions in our plant. And so even their subcommittees, we make them into forums so that, you know, we run those just like huddles. And then every day, just like our daily vital signs, we usually have the management staff, but then we also have those from the floor come up. Some of the production managers come up, and we run down every single item that you put in. And so our commitment back to them is, hey, you put something in, it's our responsibility to tag you back, even if it's an idea that we're not going to run with, right? It's so we don't leave people hanging, because if we can start to get them to foster these ideas and put them out there and make decisions on their own, that's empowering, right? If you're putting ideas out there and you get in a situation where it's just a hollow chamber, they're just, and you're not having any kind of correspondence back to them, that soon dwindles, right? The usage. And I think I kind of hit on that earlier, but I think is really being intentional and empowering them to make their decisions on their own. We encourage people from the get-go. When we hire somebody new here, you'll hear it over and over again. Ask lots of questions. We'd rather you ask lots of questions, because guess what? When you're at your factory for 7.5 years, you forget what day one was like for you. And I think you kind of put on blinders sometimes, and you forget that to look at things a different way. And they're coming in from a new perspective. And so we encourage them week one, when we start putting these iPads in front of them doing learning modules, like, hey, ask a lot of questions. You come from a different background where maybe you brought something here that we should be implementing, because we forget how it is to be new. So that's kind of where the encouragement starts, is from day one, is empowering them with getting the tool in front of them.
Very nice. Derek, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would add to that. One of the things that I've noticed in both the launches, your frontline workers can get scared, right? They feel that all of a sudden now their performance is getting graded on a minute by minute, day-to-day basis. Really do a lot of work on that to flip that script. It's not a grading piece. This is a tool for us to help you, you know, get through your day better. And that might be that you find that it is training, but you can make that a really big positive. And or you might find that, like, oh, you need to invest in a little bit of a better guide rail, or, you know, whatever it is, some small dollar investment to make their life easier. and then they feel like, what they're putting the inputs that they're putting into it, predominantly the downtime codes, there's solutions, that are going to be driven from that data, so that they don't have to continue to run into problems all day, which is ultimately everyone's goal, right? Run at the rate for the amount of time, get your output done.
Very, very nice. And Nicole, lastly, with you on that, and don't feel like you have to, but I know with the different cultures, I was wondering if there was anything you wanted to add as well.
I do, and I think mine really goes back to Nick DePrey's question that he did put in the chat, and it is around the chat function in Red Zone. So for us with so many languages, to be able to use the language option in the chats and the forums is huge. I cannot tell you how many times we have been in a management meeting and all the managers have their Red Zone tablets, and there has been a communication from the floor saying we need something, and everyone's iPad goes off. All you hear is ding, 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 ding in the meeting. And the meeting stops and everyone says, does someone need to go to the floor? And it's a quick decision. Yeah, I need to go to the floor, or I can reply in this chat and the issue is solved. You can put pictures in the chat so that you can clearly point to, hey, on this piece of equipment, this is a problem. How do I fix it? And it really, really helps the communication, not only with management, but then there's a record there. So if you forget to tell the next shift, they can still see that in the chat. So it's a highly effective tool using chat and forums. The one piece I would really encourage is to make sure, as Derek and Shane mentioned, that management is on board with being reactive to the chats and forums. Because if you lose that reactivity, you start to lose the empowerment and communication with your frontline. So it is critical. And Derek and Shane mentioned it, and I want to reiterate that. That's huge.
No, thank you. And you spot on. It's like it's the team, if you were in any sort of sport, you're right. If certain people aren't supporting the group, then you're not going to have the same results. So like I'd said, I saw in the poll, our top question people, I think it was 45% was, how do you utilize real-time data and what impact does it have? So I want to give you each a chance, and I know we're running up a little bit on time, but I wanted to give you each a chance to answer this. So maybe Nicole, I'd start with you and then go to Shane and Derek, if you guys don't mind just chatting about how you do utilize that data real time. And I'll hit one more time just I'm not sure if anyone joined late, but forums, we've talked a bit about forums. It's really, maybe your daily management meeting that you would have in a morning, or for us, we're looking for our teams to huddle throughout the course of the shift, not off the floor in a meeting room, but line side, just 2 to 5 minutes, if they reference that at all.
Yeah, definitely. So for us, obviously with my role, we look at the quality piece more than anything. And we're collecting real-time data on anything from analytical, such as moisture, ATP swabbing. So we can have very quick reaction times, to the results. Whereas before, if you pull a moisture and you write it on paper and then enter it in an Excel sheet, it's a little harder to get that real-time information. This way, it's very quick. It tells you and tells everyone if there's a check that's failed, if there's a check that's missed, what the comments were and what the corrective actions were. So that's how we use real-time data. One piece that has been valuable for us is releasing within Red Zone. So we have different processes for releasing product. And one of the pieces we use Red Zone for is an initial release. And that replaced our paper documentation review, where it was taking us up to a week to review all of the documentation. And now we have that reviewed in less than 24 hours. So that is one of the major impacts it's had on our productivity and our business. I could go on and on about sanitation and GMP audits that we're implementing, but it impacts everything every day.
Okay, thank you very much. And Shane?
Yeah, I mean, similar situation here. I think the biggest thing for us, though, was getting the right kind of codes in the system. I think when we first came out of the gate and we were trying to use red zone for everything, we tried to make a code for every single thing, right? And then when you go to try to look at that real-time data, it's like, well, where's the Pareto chart here? Like, there's too much stuff, right? And so where do I focus that? So we kind of revamped the way our codes were a couple of years ago. And some of them kind of became a little bit more evasive, but it was more of like, okay, if I see an asset on the floor and it's accumulated X amount of downtime, rather than just rely so heavily on data and analytics, because we could sit behind desks and do that, and we're still a people business, is that we use that data to go out and actually start asking questions, right? And so it's more of like, hey, I've been noticing that, the box former is starting to see a lot more operator adjustment coding. What kind of problems are you having? Because to me, then that starts to lean towards that where they're starting to think of more lean manufacturing, right? They start to look at more of that root cause analysis and start using and folding them into the mix of the problem solving. So for us, it's a little bit of mix. It's like you take the real-time data, but then you don't just obsess about that. Go start asking questions about that, because then that's when people actually see the data and they say, oh, I understand what this means, and I understand how I was brought in to help solve those problems.
Okay, and lastly, Derek, anything you want to add?
Yeah. I'll tackle it from a management support staff, and then the frontline workers from a management staff, right? How awesome is it to see how many people you have on your line and how many units you're making. From an accounting standpoint, we know real time, just by looking at our screens in the front office, and our accounting managers all have iPads on their desk. We know we're hitting our cost of goods manufactured. Real simple, real time. So it makes that part go really easy. From a supply chain standpoint, we know all our orders are getting filled. We know that we're never going to back up our warehouse because we're producing what we're supposed to be producing that day. We didn't hit 25% attainment and then keep all more materials coming in, backing things up. It's all real time. If something does happen, a machine goes down, that's going to impact our schedule, we can jump on that, immediately to either fix it, get it back up and running, and or if it's going to be a longer downtime, we can back up our materials. We can eliminate problems by having that visibility really quickly. From a frontline worker standpoint, and we have a little more manual of a process. We do have quite a few people, but just the ability to display on a daily basis that they did green bars and gold stars, right? They have the ability to feel like that they actually were good at what they did today without having management say, good job, shake everyone's hand as they leave every day. They know that they crushed it today. And if you feel like you do good, you want to keep doing it. And then all of a sudden people want to come back. They're excited to get after tomorrow. That gamification for us, we had a lot of bowlers in the building. And so if we strung together three gold stars, 3 back-to-back hours of gold stars, they'd be chirping about how they just bowled a turkey. How do we keep going for more strikes? And all of a sudden they start taking care of a lot of the things, and they feel good about it, and they're all having fun together. There's no more pointing fingers at so and so is not is sabotaging our process. They're all in it together. And conversely too, when they do have a red hour, which will happen, they all can really kind of pin their ears back and dial in and get back to green hours is probably the biggest thing that I've seen from the plant floor standpoint. They know what they need to do to make sure they get out on time and complete the job, and they feel good about that satisfaction without people having to say, hey, good job all day long. That over time gets repetitive, doesn't mean anything. They can see it.
Very nice. You kind of actually took us through to you talked a little bit about how your culture's changed over time. So thank you for that. And the next two highest questions were reactive culture and lacking accountability. And I think this sort of, ties into this. So reactive culture or lacking accountability. Shane, do you want to talk just briefly? I'll try to keep it to 1 or 2 minutes. And then I know that we were going to try to do a bit of Q&A, but just a quick answer on that, how your culture's changed.
Yeah, I mean, it brought it to the point where we're matching our guiding principle, right? I mentioned earlier it's about obsessing about the front line, but if you're not listening to the voice of the front line, how do you obsess about the front line? So by using Red Zone, that virtual voice, it's making us accountable to what we're saying our guiding principles are and making people feel inclusive.
Very, very nice. And Nicole, you get the last one. Anything just about your overall culture? I know culture has been important to you folks, of course, with the way you've hired and everything else, but even if you add into that, lacking accountability, could you just talk briefly about how your culture's changed in the journey?
Yeah, I definitely can echo the same sentiment as Derek and Shane. It brings more optimistic culture. I think the engagement has definitely increased. There's less reactivity, more visibility to downtime, and people feel more engaged and empowered. And just like they said, when that happens, they're more willing to come to work and more willing to put in that extra effort of brain power to try to figure out why the machine was down, or why did we load the wrong pouches, or help problem solve. It's not just management's job to problem solve, it's everyone on the front line. So starting that culture shift to make that happen is something that Red Zone definitely allows, just through communication and visibility.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And we may have a few other Q&As, but just before I sort of pass it back to the end, if you're interested a little more, our website's got a ton about our journey ourselves. We've only been around since 2013 and are in over 1,200 facilities now. And a lot of the growth is through word of mouth. So we've heard today even someone that's deployed it at 2 different facilities themselves. So they've left another and come and brought that to the next facility with them. And the reason why is, we didn't talk specifically about everyone's uplift today's, but our average Red Zone plant is seeing around a 29% increase over that 90-day deployment, and a 32% reduction in their staff turnover for things that the three of you have just alluded to. I'm more, I feel more valued at work. And I think it was you, Derek, that just brought it up. Like when I come in, if I know I'm doing well, I want to continue to keep that cycle running. So I wanted to just genuinely thank the panelists for sure. And thank all of you for joining. I think that we do have, and I think Kristen's going to have a follow-up here, but we have a few activities, where if you want, you can scan the QR code to get some more information or schedule a meeting. And we do have some upcoming events in Ohio, Florida, nothing like Florida on August 8th. That'll be nice. And then Oregon on August 30th, where you can learn a lot more. So I think, I think that's it for us right now. Hillary, what else do we have?
Yeah, if we have time for one question, we have another one here from the audience. And it is, how much time is needed to implement the system? Do you need a designated person to focus on implementation? What advice can you give for a successful implementation?
Hey, Derek, do you want to talk a bit about your experience, or do you want me, are you good to handle it?
Sure. I guess in our experience, we used our current team, most knowledgeable. I would say, the simplification of things. I think Shane mentioned the simplification of downtime codes, make it really easy to implement. But I think you'll find your teams really attract to it quickly. Compliance, the exact same way, like Nicole said, simplify those checks, do the legwork up front. That first week, it can feel a little overwhelming, but then to be there to support everybody as you go live, to really make everyone feel comfortable, is an important thing. So it does take time, but it's not necessary. I guess in my experience, it's not necessary that you're going to need additional staff, as you'll find once you invest the time, all of a sudden it's going to free up so much more capacity because things are going to start taking care of themselves pretty quickly.
Shane or Nicole, anything you want to add, or is that?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. If you you should be able to implement using your existing staff. I think we had our best results when we ran the implementations as projects with deadlines and regular check-ins. So that was very, very helpful. Having a point person definitely helps, but as Derek said, if you do the front work to really look at what you're asking and scope out the project correctly so that you're not trying to boil the ocean, it definitely makes a huge impact. Because if you think about it from the frontline workers, you don't want something that's cumbersome, and Red Zone is not inherently cumbersome. So make it as simple as you can make it and collect the data that you need to collect, but with good reason codes. Don't use other.
Yeah. Very nice.
And if there's one other thing I could add. The Red Zone coaches are amazing. I've worked with probably 7 or 8 of them over my time. They're all extremely knowledgeable. They ask really good questions. They learn your process. They don't try to impose someone else's process on you that doesn't make sense to you. Don't undervalue. They're some really, really intelligent people that can help you a lot.
Agree with that 150%. Our coach was amazing, still is.
No, unfortunately, none of you guys had me, so I wish that. Anyways, Hillary, I think I've run us 1 minute over. Is there anything else?
No, that should do it for us today. I just want to say thank all of you so much for joining us today, and thank you to Jonathan, Derek, Nicole, and Shane for the excellent presentation. Really good insights today. Everyone can keep an eye on your inbox in the next couple of hours for the recording and slide deck, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, folks.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you. The last thing I'd say, yeah, Kristen's got my phone number. You know, if anyone, I travel about 45 minutes to an hour every day to get up here. I got plenty of dashboard time. If you guys have further questions, I'm always open to answer phone calls. Maybe just shoot me a text first so I know what phone call I'm answering, but happy to do so.